Hi there, I'm Dr. Sandra Duncan. Welcome to Breaking the Aesthetic Code, Designing Young Children's Environments. The purpose of this presentation is to understand and acknowledge the importance of built environments, to understand how to break the traditional aesthetic code of design, and to introduce the 7 principles of design. So let's get started. Part 1 of this presentation is to help you understand why classroom design is a very important factor that can dramatically influence, either positively or negatively, young children's development. So, exactly what is a built environment? If you are like me, you may not know exactly what a built environment is. In their book, Spaces for Children, The Built Environment in Child Development, Weinstein and David define built environments like this. Built environments are man-made structures, features, and facilities viewed collectively as an environment in which people live, work, and play. Examples of built environments, then, would include houses, apartments, tents, office buildings, movie theaters, shopping malls, tree houses, igloos, restaurants, factories, and even boats, trucks, airplanes, and cars. Built environments also extend to systems such as a railroad system or a highway system. Even if you're in a park, there are many built environments all around us, in the sidewalks and even the trails that you hike. Once you begin thinking about it, built environments are everywhere and occupy a lot of our lives. In fact, in 2001, which was quite some time ago, the National Human Activity Patterns Survey found that with indoor environments, people spend 86.9% of their time, and 68.7% of people's time was spent in residencies or homes. With COVID-19, I would imagine that number to be much, much higher. Just think about the impact and how much time we must spend indoors in built environments at this very, very moment in time. Now think about how much time children are spending indoors versus before COVID. A recent study by Velux America, which is a window company, they found that one in four people, that's 25% of people, spend the entire day without going outside. That means 25% of Americans spend entire days in built environments, never being in the great outdoors. Again, this number is probably higher in today's world with COVID-19. Finally, in 2016, the National Council for Educational Statistics estimated that young children under the age of 5 spend an average of 30.6 hours a week in non-parental care, such as the built environment of a child care center. Knowing all this, it's very easy to understand why designing child care centers, and more specifically, the early childhood environment, in the play space is more than architectural blueprints, as I have thought up to this point. It is much, much more. In 2018, my husband and I moved into a lake house in Michigan, very close to my daughter, son-in-law, and my grandchild, my only grandchild, Sierra. They live less than a half a mile away. The dream was to be able to fish off the dock, or perhaps fish from a small second-hand pontoon boat we purchased the very first summer. Buzz, my husband, and we went out and bought fishing poles, bobbers, and of course, that small pink plastic tackle box. There we all were at the end of the dock, waiting patiently for the bobber to duck under the water. It didn't take long, and sure enough, pow! The bobber went under. A few seconds later, Sierra was hauling in the fish you see on the screen. Once landed on the dock, Sierra ran running up to the house, screaming all the way to anyone who might be around listening. I caught a fish! I caught a fish! I cannot believe I caught a fish! There is no doubt in my mind that years from now, even when she's old and gray, Sierra will remember the fishing dock at Grandma and Grandpa's lake house. It is the power of place. It is a place where she experienced deeply. And that is how we break the aesthetic code, the traditional aesthetic code of early childhood environments. We need environments where children can experience deeply. Catching a fish off Grandma's dock was experiencing deeply for Sierra. She now has an emotional connection to this dock. It is not merely a dock now. It's not merely a space where she went fishing, but truly a place for Sierra. Take a look at this video. Watch the young lady. Observe what she does. Look at her face and ask yourself if you think this place was a piece of the environment where she has experienced deeply. How can you tell she was experiencing deeply or had experienced deeply? Did you notice how she smelled the seaweed, pulled her boots through the sand? That is what we want for young children in our early childhood environments. They need to experience deeply. How we design our environments impacts how children experience them. be it good or not so good. Now that we understand the power of environments and acknowledge their importance, part two of this presentation is to help you understand the traditional aesthetic code of environments for young children. What's the most beautiful place in the world for you? For me, it's in St. Joe, Michigan. As a child, I played on its beaches and fished off the pier. As an adult, I sailed from its harbor and watched fireworks from its shore. As a mother, I brought my daughter to frolic in the blue waters. As a grandmother, I played in that water, that very same water, and built sand castles from the very same sand that I built as a child. I am emotionally attached to this lighthouse. I just asked you to think about the most beautiful place in the world. I would imagine that each of us thought of something different because no two people's experiences are the same or alike. And also because beauty is subjective. Yet, I'm confident in saying that whatever place you thought about, it was beautiful in your eyes and somehow intertwined or attached to emotions. Inspiring spaces are beautiful and we're emotionally connected. As early childhood educators, this is important because research has indicated that learning is more than a cognition process. It is also an emotional process. It is a relationship process, a relationship with others, with the environment, and with oneself. So, if learning is about emotional relationships, let me ask you a question. Does the relationship make the emotional connection, or does the emotional connection create the relationship? For example, was my relationship with my grandmother that caused the emotional connection to the soup that she made, or thinking about the chicken noodle soup that she made reminds me of my relationship with my grandmother? Regardless of the answer to these questions, cognition is intertwined with emotion and beauty and is significantly attached to emotions. Therefore, beauty is attached to, you guessed it, cognition. Consider thinking about the relationship between beauty and cognition as a three-part circle, like a pie, divided into three pieces. Part one of the pie or the circle is inspiring spaces are places of beauty. Look at that last word, beauty. Part two of the circle or the cycle is beauty promotes a sense of wonder. Research indicates that children are born with an inherent sense of wonder. Part three of the circle is a sense of wonder promotes lifelong learning. So the first part of the circle is inspiring spaces are places of beauty. Beauty promotes a sense of wonder, and wonder promotes lifelong learning. As teachers of young children, our goal is to help children become lifelong learners. And designing classrooms that are inspiring is one way to reach this goal. So we now have learned that emotions are linked to cognition and beauty is linked to emotions. This quote by Frank Lloyd Wright now makes perfect sense. If you foolishly ignore beauty, you will soon find yourself without it. But if you invest in beauty, it will remain with you all the days of your life. Children need and deserve beauty in their early childhood environments. So you're probably thinking to yourself right now, beauty? Beauty in play spaces? Beauty in my play space? How am I going to do that? How am I possibly going to do that? Well, one way to get to beauty in play spaces or early childhood environments is breaking the traditional aesthetic code of how we think about and design our early childhood environments. This presentation is going to encourage you to look at your play spaces with new lenses, to put on a new pair of glasses, to put on a pair of glasses with aesthetic lenses. Before the book that I co-authored called Inspiring Spaces for Young Children, the idea of intentionally infusing beauty into the classroom was pretty much unheard of. Actually, with my first keynote presentation on inspiring spaces for young children, a conferee came up to me right before I went on stage and said, "Oh, I know who you are. You're the lady who wants play spaces to be pretty," and with a tone that wasn't exactly positive, but kind of said with a twitch of disdain. The words beauty and classrooms or beauty and play spaces was pretty much non existent. At the time, I was quite taken aback, and I really didn't have an appropriate response to her. Now, in today's world, I would know exactly what to say to that lady. I would know to say that children deserve beauty in their learning environments. And we have the research that tells us that is the right and good path to follow. Take a look at this play space. It's pretty traditional. Actually, in my observations of young children's environments, I've found a common theme. It's called stuff. Most people, educators, have a mindset of how play spaces should look and feel. Stuff. Oh, and throw in stuff on the walls, stuff from the ceilings, stuff on the floor. Pretty much stuff everywhere. And don't forget to throw in lots of primary colors and most likely more stuff. One way to achieve beauty and to get to inspiring is breaking these traditional aesthetic codes. What exactly is aesthetics? To find out the answer to this question, what did I do? I Googled it, of course. And what I found out is aesthetics is people's perception of what is familiar and what is socially accepted. Let's take a deeper look at the aesthetic code, this idea about aesthetics, of what is expected or what is familiar in some environments. For example, what's the aesthetic code of a football field? What does society expect when they go to a football game? Some expectations might be loud, band playing, colorful jerseys, green field, hard benches, maybe the smell of hot dogs. That's pretty much what you expect when you go to a football field. What about a doctor's office? What's the aesthetic code of a doctor's office? If you think about what do you anticipate or what do you expect when you walk into a doctor's office, you might think about white, sterile, stainless steel, serious atmosphere, smell of disinfectant, and as my daughter said, elevator music. So, what about a hotel room? What's the aesthetic code of a hotel room? It might be clean, hopefully, television, closet, dresser, comfy chairs, couches, a bed, a bathroom. That's what you expect. That's the aesthetic code of a hotel room, right? Several years ago, I had a contract with the United States Air Force to work with them on inspiring spaces. And here's my hotel room, a place where I stayed for quite a long time. And I think it was at Kadena Air Force Base in Korea. If you look at this picture, this image, you can see that there's an aesthetic code going on. It's traditional, accepted aesthetic code. It has a couch, a television, end tables. In the other room, there was a bedroom, a bathroom. There was also a little kitchenette right off from the living room area. Notice the couch against the wall with the high hung pictures and the table and chairs directly in front of the television. Interesting place for that. A good description of this room would include the word institutional. Being a tradition breaker, I decided to break the aesthetic code of this hotel room. So take a look at this image, and I decided I was going to break the expected traditional aesthetic code of a hotel. And so this is what I did. I moved the couch to another wall, put the overstuffed chair at an angle, and positioned the table and chairs away from the front of the television. Additionally, I took the coffee condiments out of the metal basket, added some fresh fruits and vegetables, and placed that in the middle of the table. On the cocktail table in front of the couch, I placed the seashells found at the beach in a wicker basket that was purchased for 100 yen, for 100 yen at the yen store. That's $1. I added a green plant, inexpensive red striped pillow found at the yen store, and a red scarf that I found in my suitcase. Finally, the floor lamp was turned on and the overhead fluorescent lights were turned off. The traditional aesthetic code of a hotel room was broken by deinstitutionalizing the space and making it more like a home-like place. So think about the traditional aesthetic code of a preschool classroom. What is society's perception of the accepted aesthetic code of a preschool classroom or a preschool play space? There are many traditionally accepted codes that permeate preschool spaces, such as the notion that the walls must be filled with children's work. That denotes productivity, right? That an abundance of commercially purchased toys indicates a well-equipped space, and that overladen shelves result in learning. When we consider our play spaces, we know most classrooms have the right kind of equipment, which is arranged into the proper learning centers, for example, the block or the home living center or the arts center. Most classrooms have the right amount and types of learning materials, such as the type and number of blocks, the type and number of books. Most classrooms have the basic needs for licensing, accreditation, or environmental rating scales. But most classrooms are filled with bright, colorful pieces of equipment, toys, learning materials, and rugs. Most classrooms have a lot of plastic, including baskets, toys, and furniture. Most classrooms have commercially purchased posters, decorative borders, and bulletin board decorations. Most classrooms, as I've said before, have a lot of stuff. And here's a great example in this image. This is a traditional preschool play space. It is up to us to break this traditional aesthetic code. It is important for us to do this for children. Part 3 of this presentation is called Introducing the 7 Principles of Design. In 2008, I got together with 4 other early childhood educators and professionals, and we talked about how most early childhood environments are institutional, like you saw in the previous image, how they're cookie cutter, how they're filled with plastic and stuff in primary colors. We grieved how little nature or signs of nature are found in most environments, with the exception maybe of a half-alive plant in the science area. We discussed the minimal respect of children's world and their work, especially in classroom displays. There was a lively discussion of Reggio Emilia's philosophy of light and illumination, as well as layers and layers of texture and reflection of the community, which is infused into Reggio's environments. All this conversation led to the writing of Inspiring Spaces for Young Children and the Rating Observation Scale for Inspiring Spaces, both published in 2010. Inspiring Spaces for Young Children, in its companion book entitled Rating Observation Scale for Inspiring Environments, better known as ROSI, created quite a stir because in 2010 there was no one in our field putting together these two words, inspiring and classroom. Up to this point, we all thought about classroom design in terms of functionality. That is, be sure to put the painting easel in the art area near a source of water, or put the block area in an off the beaten path so children's construction would not get knocked over or disturbed. There's been all sorts of research on the need for beauty, not only for young children, but for us all. The early childhood field is only now beginning to understand the importance of beauty in children's lives. Dr. Ruth Wilson, a proponent of beauty, indicates that children have a right and they also have a need for beauty. The Inspiring Spaces book put forth 7 principles of design, which you're going to learn a little bit about these principles later on in the presentation. We have the research about the impact of infusing these 7 principles of design in early childhood play spaces, and we have found that by implementing or infusing or introducing these principles into the play space, we have negative behaviors, decreased negative behaviors, increased focus and attention, enhanced involvement, and less stress for child and adult. As early childhood professionals, the authors of Inspiring Spaces for Young Children understood how we all work very, very hard to create play spaces where young children can learn and grow. The introduction of the 7 principles of design, which are in the book, was not debating the fact that we all work hard. Rather, the purpose of the book was to create a new mindset, a new perspective, a new way of thinking about designing play spaces. Its purpose was to connect 2 words, classrooms or play spaces, with inspiring. We wanted to connect those 2 words together for teachers to understand why good is not enough. Here's an example of a good classroom. Pictured here is the home living area or the place where children play in the kitchen and living room. Take note of that red couch and chair. Take note of the oval tan rug and the stove sink combination. In a few moments, you will see how this furniture has been repositioned. You will see how this classroom was transformed from a good design to an inspiring design using the 7 principles of design. So, the idea of the seven principles of design is to get teachers thinking about the aesthetics and beauty. Because of that cycle that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, remember, inspiring spaces are places of beauty, beauty promote a sense of wonder, and wonder promotes lifelong learning. And isn't that what we want for all children? To be lifelong learners. We need to get our early childhood environments, our play spaces, from good to inspiring, because inspiring is beautiful. And beauty promotes wonder, and wonder promotes lifelong learning. If you get nothing else from this presentation, I hope you take away this idea. Take a quick look at each of the seven principles of design. Principle 1. Nature instills beauty. The backbone of this principle, nature instills beauty, is to infuse nature everywhere. Not only the teacher, but the architect, the interior designer, the planner, anybody that has anything to do with the built environment of early childhood classrooms, the idea is to infuse nature everywhere. Floor, walls, ceilings, tabletops, countertops, everywhere that you can possibly infuse nature. The reason why we want to infuse nature in all parts and spaces of the classroom and in the early childhood center is that research has indicated children who have frequent interactions with nature have increased academic success. For more information and data on this statement, you can go to www.natureexplored.org and find plenty of resources and research papers on this topic. Most play spaces have a lot of plastic in them. Unfortunately, plastic steals beauty. The reason why plastic steals beauty is that it has no visual or kinesthetic texture to it. But plastic also steals much, much more than beauty. Take a look at this chart provided by Sally Hoy, founder of Fairy Dust Teaching, which illustrates what else plastic steals. If you look at the left-hand side of the chart or the graph, you can see that living items, living objects, have a sense of calm. They promote calm. The middle column is organic objects, organic materials, branches, rocks, shells, that sort of stuff. But on the far right, we have non-living objects, plastic and man-made materials and equipment. You can see how the scale goes from very calm when you have lots of living objects in your environment to a lack of calm the more plastic and man-made materials you have in your classroom. So in addition to stealing beauty, plastic also steals the calmness of your room. Less plastic equals more beauty. More beauty equals increased calm. There is a difference between nature objects and natural objects. Teachers have a tendency to gravitate more towards the nature objects such as tree pods, pine cones, seashells, river rocks, driftwood, and bamboo pieces. As you can see in this image, the teacher is using a tree cookie for a dinner plate. But there's also other kinds of nature that you can infuse into a classroom, and those are natural objects. Natural objects are objects made out of nature. So those examples include wicker baskets, woven placemats, terracotta, pottery, textile, all sorts of things that you can instill natural objects into the early childhood classroom. Another idea for instilling beauty with nature is this. Messy play with natural elements, such as water or clay, is a must for early childhood environments. Yet, we continue to design play spaces that do not support children getting messy. All preschool environments should have a designated messy area, preferably in an out-of-the-way corner, with a water source and floor drain. Tile up the walls and on the floor surrounded by half walls to protect the rest of the classroom. Think about it like a walk-in shower, but shrunk. If this idea is too grandiose, at the very least, get rid of the wall-to-wall carpets or even partially carpeted rooms. Use area rugs for creating cozy areas and install cork water-resistant wood of natural or natural linoleum floor. Please put the Play-Doh out of the reach of young children and in its place use real clay. Real clay instills beauty in classrooms. There are so many benefits of using real clay, but because of the time, we cannot explore this topic. Consider a clay table in your play space. This table should be designed to be an open area that children can visit at will, much like many of the other learning centers, such as Dramatic Play or the Block Corner. Tips for success include 1. Finding a clay table with a lip around its edges to keep the clay from falling to the ground. 2. Covering the clay at night with a cloth-backed plastic tablecloth. 3. Using authentic wood utensils such as rolling pins and spoons. 4. Providing a first rinse of hands in soapy water in a bucket near the table. 5. Placing a drop cloth under the table to catch the getaway clay pieces. And finally, finding a large enough table to accommodate at least 3 children. Here's a smaller version of a community clay table, which is just a table from a recycle shop and designed for just one child. Note the extra work materials in the table's drawer on the right-hand side of the table, the clay being stored in a plastic jar, and the display shelf for children's work. Remember, the clay table should be available every day, all day. Principle number 2 is color generates interest. The purpose of this principle is to use color intentionally. Create neutral palettes and then insert pops of color
such as in this living room of the children's home play area. It's not to say that we can't use primary colors. It's to say that we must use them in an intentional, purposeful way. Research does, however, indicate that too many primary colors may negatively impact children's behavior, so it's important to select a color palette that's neutral. But don't get too neutral and too monotone because research indicates monotone environments may cause anxiety or the inability to concentrate. So select colors and pops of colors and intentionally place them, for example, on a wall like you see here. It's important that the color palette that is chosen for the classroom and for the center and overall generates interest in the community. So the color palette should reflect the outside community. Take a step outside the door of the early childhood center. What do you see? What colors do you see? What is surrounding you? Is there an ocean? Is there a wheat field? What is the bird that is prevalent in the backyard, in the playground? Have the color palette reflect the community and surrounding topography, geography, flora, and fauna. Principle number 3 is furnishings define space. In working with this principle, furnishings define space, I have found that the placement of the furniture is just as important as the furniture itself. Research indicates that the placement of furnishings impacts children's behavior and their social emotional development either positively or negatively. Here's a good example of how positioning of the furniture is as important as the furniture itself. This is a home living area in a preschool classroom that I visited, and I noticed that there were no children playing in the home living area, but they were all playing in the adjacent rug area and not really playing with the refrigerator or the stove or the sink or all the wonderful little objects that would create delight for most preschoolers. They were all over on the rug. And then I noticed a couple of children venturing into the space and that they were very crowded. One tried to open up the refrigerator door and one was sitting in the chair, and they couldn't do that because there wasn't enough room. So the positioning of this furniture was too close together. There was only one entryway to get into the center and one way to get out. So that created traffic congestion. And it would basically was a center that was inoperable and not pleasant for children to be in because the furniture was all cramped together. Here's an after. I took the tiny cramped up space, that little space in the corner, and I put it against a wall, spread out the furniture, so now you can see that the children can easily navigate the center. There's many places for them to enter and exit the center. There's transparency at the face of the center, so that means there's no storage units or anything blocking the view of children before they come into the center. So the placement of this furniture now becomes more important than the furniture itself. The thing I really want to emphasize in this image is I needed that wall space. I needed that wall space to create this center that is far more effective and functional for children. So I'm pleading and begging to the architects and to the planners and to the designers of classrooms to be sure to give, especially in early childhood classrooms, to give uninterrupted wall space. Figure out how you can maybe put the doors in a position where they're not in the middle of a wall, but they're off to the side. Figure out how you can put the bathrooms or storage areas in spaces where the wall is not as interrupted, and that we can have a big expanse of space, wall space, to create centers like this. Teachers often struggle with the size or square footage of their classrooms, making space a highly valued premium. Vertical learning environments, or environments on the wall, are perfect solutions to this problem. In addition to providing extra space for children to act and react and be involved with, vertical learning environments encourage midline crossing, spatial awareness, improves their proprioception, and promotes affordances for young children. Here you see two children enjoying the vertical wall and constructing a wavy roadway for their small car. There is a problem, however, with this idea. Vertical learning environments require wall space. When designing the room's interior, always be aware of the importance of uninterrupted wall space without doors, sinks, or windows. At the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that furnishings can impact social emotional development. You might be surprised to learn that even certain types of seating can promote social emotional development. One type of seating that can promote social emotional development is a bench. A professor did some research with 3 children sitting at a long table. She put the 3 children in 3 separate chairs, and then she gave them some manipulatives to play with. She watched and observed the 3 children as they played with the manipulatives in the 3 separate chairs. She noticed that they didn't talk to each other very much, they didn't collaborate, they didn't play with each other, they just sort of sat there in their 3 separate chairs playing with the toys that the teacher had provided. Then she called the middle child out from the middle chair and called him over to her, and she watched to see what the 2 remaining children would do. They actually did nothing. They just continued to play by themselves without interaction and without collaboration. Then she put the same 3 children on a bench, and she watched them play with the same 3 materials, and as she observed them, she noticed that immediately there was more conversation, there was more collaboration, there was more sharing of the manipulative. And then she called the child in the middle out and to her, and she watched what happened to the 2 children on the ends. What happened was they scooched together and they started playing together. So that's just a very small piece of research that's been done on the importance of perhaps providing benches in your class. Principle number 4 is texture adds depth. Research shows that visual and physical texture increases children's visual, spatial, and physical skills. For an example, when a child looks at a pine cone and closely observe it, it increases his focus and his observation skills. Keen observation skills are critical for reading. For example, understanding and observing the difference between a lowercase b and a lowercase d. Teachers can install physical and visual texture into the built environment. In this example, it's nothing more than a piece of carpet with those curlers, those plastic curlers that would stick to the carpet. And so the child is able to move the curlers back and forth on the carpet and pull them off and stick them on. That's a visual and physical texture into the environment. Architects and designers and interior decorators can do the same thing in adding texture to the classroom. In this classroom, there's visual texture with the glass blocks. Another example of visual texture with the hanging curtains. Bricks to the classroom creates not only visual texture, but also kinesthetic texture, as in this example where the children painted the bricks, and then they were adhered to the wall. Next principle is displays enhance environment. Premise of this principle is to display children's work with honor. A standard rule of thumb is if you're about ready to hang up a child's artwork or a child's piece of work, if you would not hang it up in your own living room or your own kitchen the way it is right now, then it's better left not hung up. Bulletin boards can often become very institutional. In this case, the teacher did an excellent job of using woven placemats and the child's self-portrait as well as the child's image, along with some ribbon that went around the outside of the bulletin board. This is a wonderful display of children's work, but many times teachers often do not use bulletin boards appropriately, and they end up being very loud, very busy, and not really a sense of order to them, and they certainly don't honor children's work in the way that the work is displayed. So facility planners consider eliminating some, if not all, of the bulletin boards from the classroom and look to more contemporary ways of displaying students' work, such as floating shelves or a hanging wire system or a large clip system. Curio shelves, such as the one you see on the left, are another way to display children's work with honor. Also, built-in display cases, such as the one you see on the right that was built into a hallway, is another good way to display children's work with integrity and with honor that it deserves. Principle number 5 is elements heighten ambiance. The basis of this principle is to infuse your space with several different types of ambiance, such as light, sound, and smell. Research indicates sensorial elements, kinesthetic, auditory, visual, olfactory, supports Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences and impacts student learning. With elements heighten ambiance in terms of lighting, number 1, say no to fluorescent lights if you can. Number 2, say yes to ambient lighting. And number 3, figure out a way to infuse 3 levels of lighting in the classroom. Reggio Emilia promotes the opportunity for children to play with light, shadow, and illumination. So it's important for them, therefore, to have the place to do that. So we get back to this whole idea about uninterrupted wall space. So as you're designing your classroom interior, architects and designers, please remember to try to give as much wall space as possible for this type of creative play. Here's an example of how a teacher transformed a corner of her classroom into what I call an illumination station. You can see all sorts of opportunities for children to play with light and shadow and illumination. But that wouldn't happen if she didn't have the wall space, the uninterrupted wall space. Principle 7 is focal points attract attention. Children's visual viewpoints are important to their interactions with the environment. And what we have to do is we need to remember that their viewpoints, children's viewpoints, are quite different than adult viewpoints. Why? Because children are built lower to the ground. So the next time you want to understand a child's viewpoint, get down to the level or the height that they are and look around and see what you see. It's quite different than what you see as an adult. Research indicates a positive visual view from the classroom door helps children transition from their outside world to the classroom world. The question is, what do they see when they open up the classroom door? Do they see custodial objects such as cubbies, changing tables, food prep areas, or do they see something that is interesting and makes them want to come into the classroom door? The important thing to remember as designers of early childhood classrooms is to understand what children see and to design the classroom so it makes them want to transition from their world into the classroom world. A few case studies that illustrate some of these principles of design, especially the view from the door and how we can make that view better for young children.
This picture image was taken from the door. It was also taken from the height of a child. So this would be what a child would see as he enters this classroom door. Take a note at the cots that are stacked against a gray cabinet. You can't see the cabinet very well, but it was very large and extremely tall. Also take a look at the chairs that are stacked up in the back left and pay special attention to the sign that says Friends. In the next image, you're going to see how the view from the door was transformed to make it an improved view for young children.
Here you see the classroom after I put the cots into a closet at the back of the room, after I moved the big gray storage cabinet to the far left in the back of the room, and after I created a welcome area under the sign of the friend sign with a small chair, a basket of books, and a cubby that had been placed on its side to make shelving units because we had nothing else. So we improvised and made shelving units out of a cubby. The important point that I would like to make about the transformation of this classroom is cots are always challenging to design around. They're always an eyesore. There's never a good place for cots in the interior of the classroom. The only good place for cots is in a closet. So think about how you could design a closet that's specific for cots, or design a closet that is a storage closet for learning materials but also has room for the cots. This picture was taken in the doorway at a child's height of a preschool classroom. If I were a preschooler and I was entering this classroom, all I would see at this point would be cubbies on my right, cubbies on my left, and cubbies in front of me. I would have to walk, and finally turn right before I got to see anything else in the classroom. But the real problem also becomes if I walk, and turn right, this is my viewpoint. This is what I see. I see this small, confined little home living area. I don't see anything else beyond this area. I have to walk some more past the cabinet that you see on the left in the back of the room. I have to walk past that in order to get into the other part of the classroom. So my visual view, even though I walk past all those cubbies, is still not that interesting as I walk into the classroom. To improve the visual view for these young children who come into this classroom, I needed to leave the cubbies on the left and the cubbies in front of the child. I needed to leave those there. But I discovered the cubbies on the right were not being used for anything except for maybe collecting junk. So I decided to get rid of that set of cubbies, which opened up the room completely. So when you came into the room, if you immediately looked to the right, this is what you would see. Look at the bottom right corner of this image. That is exactly where the cubbies were situated. So now if I'm a 4-year-old child, I come in, I look right, I see the beautiful classroom windows that overlook this gorgeous greenery. I see an open space, very comfortable, many spots for me to enter and exit that particular learning center. I actually see an invitation to come into that room. I want to come into that room because it looks like fun. The thing that I would like to emphasize in this particular case study is the idea about built-in cubbies. I was able to make this room have a better viewpoint for children because the cubbies were not built in. They were movable cubbies. However, if you build in cubbies, especially at the beginning of the classroom, at the classroom door, you continually have an eyesore. You continually send out messages to everybody that enters. Gee, I wonder what this classroom is about. Is this classroom about custodial care and look at the mess that they have with these cubbies? Or is this classroom about learning and fun and interaction with these wonderful materials and this wonderful home living area? What is this classroom about? So I urge you to have the client consider not building in cubbies, especially not at the front of the room by the main classroom entry door. If anything, have the cubbies, if they do have to have built-in cubbies, have them back in the back of the room. That makes the parent have to come into the classroom. And that makes the parent have to traverse the classroom so she or he or the family caregiver will be able to see all the wonderful stuff that's going on in your classroom. They'll be forced to come through the classroom to get to the child's cubby. Again, This photo was taken at the classroom door at the height of a preschooler. This is one of my most favorite transformations. As a 4-year-old would walk into this classroom, what he would walk along is the back of two block cabinets that you see on the left. He would also be facing the big pillar right in front of him. On the right was a classroom wall that had nothing of interest on the wall. So you basically walked through a walkway through the length of those two cabinets. There are so many things wrong in the design of this classroom on so many different levels. First of all, one wonders if in the design of the classroom, if there is a pillar or some sort of obstacle in the interior of the classroom, could the classroom door be positioned at such a way that the child or the people who enter the classroom would not have to go face to face with a huge pillar? Could the classroom door, for example, be put on the wall that's on the right? In this case, absolutely, the classroom door could have been put there, and then the classroom door would be not facing the pillar, but facing those windows that you see on the top right. The other problem is that the teacher created was the back of the cabinets. So when a 4-year-old walks in here to this classroom, there's really no reason to be excited about walking into this classroom. There's nothing exciting to see. So what I did was I took those two block cabinets that the child walked behind the back of them. I took them and I put them in the far corner of the room and made that the block area. Then I used the pillar, instead of being a detriment, I made lemonade out of lemons, and I used the pillar as the foundation or the anchor for the home living center. And you can see I put the refrigerator right on the pillar, and then I built the home living center around it. So there are a couple of things that one might consider when designing and building classrooms that have things like pillars in them. If you could think about moving the classroom door so when you open it up, you're not faced with the pillar or some other design obstacle, but you're faced with something far more interesting to look at. Could you put the door on another wall? Could you put the door, move it to the left or move it to the right? What could you do with the door that would make the pillar or any other obstacle make it seem kind of out of the picture? The second thing to think about is, especially if you're a teacher, is to make use of the beautiful windows and the sunlight and the natural light that comes in through those windows. Make use of that. Don't hide it. Make sure that no matter where you are in the classroom, that you can see the light coming in through those windows. That's very, very important in terms of the natural light, the visual view, and especially being able to see the transparency between inside and outside. Bottom line for principle number 7, focal point attracts attention, is to always, always create a reason for children to come in.
I'm Dr. Sandra Duncan, and I so hope that you have enjoyed this presentation. If you have any comments, questions, or would like to share some of your classroom or play-space environments with me, please feel free to do so. I would enjoy hearing from you. Goodbye for now.